All right, welcome to the Tanks of War setup. So depending on the scenario or the variant that you're going to be playing, you're going to have your terrain organized in different ways. So for example, if you're playing a scenario, you may have fixed terrain that's pre-positioned. You and your opponent can decide how you want the terrain also positioned, or you can go ahead and place those randomly. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and grab 4 supply 10 cards. This is used to purchase the different cards and tanks throughout the game. You're going to find the card called Commander Spotting. This is a card that basically allows your commander to pop out of the turret of the vehicle and scan the horizon and make it easier for you to spot enemy vehicles. That goes in there. And then what you're going to do is draw the first 7 cards at the top of your purchase deck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This combines with those cards. You're going to shuffle these, and this becomes your draw deck. Now, depending on, again, the scenario or the variant you're going to be playing, like if it's a tank deathmatch or whatnot, what you'll do is based off the point value that you and your opponent agree to play to, let's say it's 50 points or a 100-point game, you'll buy vehicles up to that cost. So let's say it's a 50-point game. This vehicle is 26 points, then you'll have the remaining balance to spend on other vehicles. What this does is it allows you to customize what your starting deployment of tanks and tank destroyers are. So you may want to go for a lot of tank destroyers like these guys, or fast scouts, or maybe bump it up a little bit with some heavier or medium-sized vehicles like this one's 26 points. And all the different vehicles, they all have strengths and weaknesses based off historical data, and it's translated to game terms. So some vehicles may have stronger front armor, of course weaker side armor, or more hull, more ammo, better crew, or different gun values, etc. Once you've chosen the vehicles, they'll go ahead and deploy face down, and that's going to go ahead and be your starting force. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the purchase phase. So you're seeing a lot of cards here. This represents my hand. That's my draw deck right here. Now, there's this card called the reference card. It's got a bunch of great information as to what you can do on each turn, what your tanks can do, etc. It also shows your momentum, and we'll talk about that later. Now, every purchase phase, both players are going to go ahead and have the option to purchase cards from either their vehicle deck and or their force deck. Think of force cards as action cards that augment your strategies throughout the game, like doing an airstrike or tactical brilliance or press the attack regardless of the cost, etc. Now, each purchase phase, you can draw up to 3 cards from each of these different purchase decks and put them on your purchase stacks as such. And so you could do this over here as well. Now you don't have to do this, but it gives you the option to quickly cycle through your different purchase decks to find the cards that you really want and buy them. Now you buy them by discarding a number of supply cards equal to its face value based on the cost of the card. So for example, this one costs 10, this one costs 15, etc. So to buy this card, I would just simply discard this card from my hand, put that in my discard pile, pick up the card I want to buy, and also put that in my discard pile. Once you've exhausted your draw deck, you'll shuffle your discards together to form your new draw deck. And whenever you buy something, this actually immediately refreshes. So again, it gives you other options to quickly cycle through your deck. Now, after both players have purchased simultaneously, you're going to roll for initiative. And that's done by rolling a d6 and adding your momentum. And whoever has the highest roll gets to choose whether they want to act first or not. Now, your momentum is going to shift throughout the game based off primarily when you destroy another vehicle. So for example, let's say you're at 3 and you destroy a vehicle, you shift to 4. Your opponent would actually shift down 1. So having momentum is critical in the game because sometimes you really want to go first, or at least have that option to choose to go first or second. And that's the initiative phase. All right, now let's say the Germans won the initiative. This is the current layout of the board. Let's say several turns have gone by. You'll notice that these vehicles are placed face down. because they're currently not spotted by the enemy. And you can also see these Russian vehicles are not spotted. You cannot fire or target an enemy vehicle that is currently hidden or not spotted. Now, at the start of your activation, you're going to choose one of your vehicles to activate. Okay? Once you're done activating, the play then goes to your opponent, who would then activate one of their vehicles. Then you would go back to doing one of your vehicles. Once you're done with the vehicle, you just put a done token, so it's just easy to remember. Okay? Now, what you can do with a vehicle on your turn, there's several options. You can of course move, you can rotate your vehicle, you can fire, you can try to spot, and so forth. Now let's take a look at this vehicle right here. You'll see the 50%. This crew right here are considered conscripts. Okay, they have a 50% chance to spot. Oh, actually that's green. Sorry about that. The camera showed yellow. So these are actually green troops, and they have a 50% chance right now to spot. Now, of course, there's some modifiers like range and if they're in the woods and whatnot. But simply what you do is you shake these percentile dice, and you'll see here I got a 34%. And all I needed to do was to score equal to or under. I have now spotted this vehicle, but spotting costs me 1 action point. Each vehicle has 2 action points that they can do each turn. So for example, to fire is 1 action point, to move, there's some rules for that, but that costs action points. You can rotate, you can also try to hide again, you could reload, and so forth. There's actually several options that you've got. Now that this vehicle is spotted, and it happens to be a T-70 model 1942, it's an alright tank, not too bad. This vehicle can now fire at it. Okay, so we're just going to ignore these traits right now, just for the sake of this demonstration. But if I wanted to fire, I show that I'm firing, I'm spending 1 of my ammo. I've got 14 total for this vehicle. Once I get to 14 ammo tokens or whatnot on this vehicle, I can no longer fire until I start reloading. So I'm going to go ahead and fire, and again, I just use the same thing here. I need a 50% or under. I roll, and here I got a 49%, okay? And I hit him. What I do is I take my weapon damage. This is for hard targets, and yellow represents a D4, and these are actually color-coded in the game. I apologize for the demo, I don't have color-coded dice. You shake that, and you get the score, and you'll see that it's number 3. I've done 3 points of damage potentially to this vehicle, but I'm firing against its front armor. Each one of these symbols represents a D6. So this vehicle actually is going to roll 3d6 for their armor. 2 plus 1 plus 1. That's a horrible roll. 2 plus 2 is 4. I rolled a 3. Ding! The shell bounces off the armor. Now, let's say, for example, my damage had been greater than the armor rolled. The damage that would go through would go onto this vehicle's hull. He only has 3 hull points. So let's say I had done 2 damage. I would put a 2 damage counter right here. Okay? And that would show the amount of damage that I just did to that vehicle. Now, should the amount of damage equal or exceed the number of hull points that the vehicle has, you're going to destroy it and score a number of victory points equal to the cost of that vehicle. Here we've got about 26 points. Okay. Now, there are different kind of cards that you can play, such as critical cards, and this one's called Penetrating Shot. Now, depending on the amount of damage that you do to a vehicle, you can play certain critical cards. You'll notice that the hull values have different color codes: green, yellow, red. Depending on how severe that damage is done, you can play certain critical cards. So for example, this one, Penetrating Shot, you need a green 1+, meaning you needed to have done at least 1 point of damage into the target's hull at green, in which in this case we had. So I can play this card, which essentially gives me a +1 to my damage. And there's other cards that you can play. You may have a force card called Panzer Gunnery. This is a response, and it says if your tank crew is veteran or better, you can re-roll the attack dice on a failed hit.
So you've got these different cards that can modify the battle situation. So you're just not dependent on dice roll. You've got to see, well, what does my opponent have? What do I have? And whatnot. Okay, let's take a look at some of the other mechanics that are in Tanks of War. There's something called a commander action, and there's several commander actions that you can do, and you can do one commander action each game turn. And once you've done it, you just flip over that token, and this says acted or done. Okay. Now you can do commander actions such as you can give one of your vehicles an additional action point. You can do a full reload. So let's say, for example, this vehicle is out of ammo or almost out of ammo. Instead of this tank itself spending its own actions to reload, you can commander action it to fully reload. Okay, and there's other things you can do, such as rally a vehicle. You can also place cards in your reserve. Let's take a look at that. You'll see on the reference card a supply reserve and a normal reserve. So, since this is a deck building board game, there's going to be some cards that you may not necessarily want in your hand or are very situational. So, for example, this card here, Extra Shells, this lets you gain ammo capacity for your vehicle. So instead of kind of having this just be a filler card for your hand, let's say this card doesn't really apply to the current battle or things are going your way and you really don't need this, you can say I'm going to commander action up to 2 cards, and what they do is they actually go over here into your reserve. Okay, let's say we did these 2. These basically get out of your hand. You're not going to be drawing them anymore. They effectively act as a trash mechanism, but they're not out of the game. You can use these anytime you could use action cards or response cards, but what happens is once you use one of these cards from your reserve, they actually get decommissioned, meaning they get out of the game and they go back to their deck's respective permanent discard pile. Okay. You can also do that with your supply reserves as well. You may be doing really well with money and you don't want to be drawing money anymore, so you can go ahead and commander action to start putting cards here. And like over there, if you use a supply card, that gets permanently decommissioned, meaning it goes back into where it came from. Okay. And so those are some of the other mechanics. We also talked about momentum, how that shifts. When you destroy an enemy vehicle, you raise it up 1. When you lose a vehicle, it goes down, and momentum affects the modifier for your initiative roll. All right, so we talked about the different phases of the turn. At the start of the turn, you draw up to 7 cards. Then you do the purchase phase, meaning you'll go ahead and refresh these cards. We talked about that. Gives you more options to purchase. You and your opponent are going to purchase simultaneously. Once you're done, if you've had any vehicles that you bought, you'll go ahead and deploy them based off the initiative roll. Then we talked about how you're going to alternate actions, and then finally the wrap-up phase. This gives both players an opportunity to do their commander action if they have not yet done so, and it also allows for players to discard any number of cards from their hand, so on the next turn they can draw up to 7 cards. So I really wanted to make the game where you can just really go through your purchase deck and find those cards that you really want, that are situational for what your opponent is doing. And so it really brings that extra character and life to Tanks of War. And also, prior to the game, with these purchase stacks, there is an element of customization and collectability. Well, I wouldn't say collectability, but I guess customization is more of a better word. You can actually, let's say you bought 2 Tanks of War starter decks or starter boxes. You can actually take out cards and put cards in. There's rules for all that. So you can really customize your deck. So you're actually kind of deck building times 2. What you can draw from here, and then again also as when you're building your deck and the cards that you're drawing each turn. So it's another interesting mechanism. Same thing with this, with your vehicles. You can also bring to the game the vehicles that you really want to draw and have. Some players will be, may think, well, why don't I just, have a bunch of tigers or really great tanks? You can do that, but keep in mind, those expensive vehicles take a while to purchase and to bring out. And you've got to weigh these kind of options as you're playing. So that's just a quick summary of the wrap-up phase.